Hello there, Star Wars fans. I'm Mike, and in this week's video, I share thoughts on if we could see Jacen Syndulla in Star Wars Resistance. First, however, I want to say welcome back to Star Wars Speculation, where we ask you to use the force within you to make the Star Wars community a better place by sharing your theories and speculation. And you can do that by answering the question of the day at the end of the video. But let's get right into the topic, which is again, could we see the son of Kanan Jarrus and Jacen Syndulla in the upcoming Star Wars Resistance show? Well, Roberto commented and he stated, if Jacen Syndulla was to appear in the Star Wars Resistance show, he would have to be a pilot in the Resistance. It makes sense since his mother Hera was one of the best pilots in the Rebellion. And yeah, Roberto, that is definitely something that comes to mind. He would be in the Resistance. That was something that Hera might want. Although Hera in her old age may not want her son to be part of another galactic war, it's hard to tell. Mark also commented saying, if Jacen would be introduced, I'd personally like to see him as a Force-sensitive pilot fighting for the Resistance. And yeah, this brings up a really interesting point, Mark. If Jacen is Force-sensitive, does that mean, or does it interfere rather, with Luke Skywalker being the last Jedi? And personally, as long as Jacen isn't a Jedi, I don't think it has anything to do with Luke and him being the last Jedi. It'd be really interesting if Jacen also had some sort of awakening similar to the time frame that Rey goes through her awakening. Maybe he's sort of lost like she is and has discovered his new powers. Jay Mikowski states, I think Jacen would make a great role model for Kazuda in Season 2 of Resistance, and I totally agree. I think we could see Jacen come in at the end of Season 1, similar to how Ahsoka comes into the end of Season 1 of Rebels. I mean, personally, I'd like to see him earlier in that, but really, we need to develop those characters and get to know them before we start reintroducing characters from Rebels. Turkland TV also commented on last week's community video and he stated, Jacen would be in his mid-30s if we'd meet him in Resistance. At this age, I don't find it unlikely that he would have already stepped out of the cockpit and into a commanding position. And yeah, that would be interesting. Turkland TV also stated that Dave Filoni and crew are probably just going to put him in the cockpit. He's probably going to be a pilot and some sort of role model to Kazuda, as already mentioned. But it'd be interesting to see something else as well, and maybe he is in a commanding position. Maybe in fact he's one of the racing pilots that come to Colossus Station. The Medieval Man 9 also suggested right away we know he's a pilot, so the question then becomes, what does he pilot? He could be a fighter pilot like Poe, but then we'd have to ask the question, where was he during The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi? I can't see the Resistance just prior to the assault on Starkiller Base not calling in someone who has even a fraction of Hera's flying skills to maximize the odds of success on an attack to take out a planet killer. And then there's the influence of Hera to consider. She was a kick-ass pilot in pretty much everything she flew, but whenever she was given the chance to fly something of her own choice, she always chose the Ghost. Even though it was a much bigger ship than a fighter and less maneuverable, she was always much more comfortable taking the Ghost into battle. And this was the ship with which she taught Jacen how to fly. Jacen would probably be the same way as his mother and be far more comfortable and skilled flying a larger ship like the Ghost, rather than flying something like a fighter. And yeah, you bring up a really cool point here, Medieval Man 9. Wouldn't it be cool to see the Ghost in Star Wars Resistance? Maybe Hera has passed on, and of course she would have passed on her ship to her son, and now Jacen is out there. He's not necessarily smuggling things, but he's just maybe a legit cargo hauler that is working with the Resistance at times. I find that idea really fascinating, and I think it could go well with the Resistance show, and it makes a little more sense than Jacen just being part of the Resistance. Again, if Jacen was a Resistance pilot, then why wouldn't he be in one of the movies? Ivan is someone else who left a great comment. He says, with the respect to the appearance of Jacen Syndulla, I think that he could well be introduced. For me, the scenario would be this. During the last episodes of the first season of Star Wars Resistance, the Team Fireball has to infiltrate into a First Order base to steal some private data, but this is largely defended by TIE fighters. With difficulty, they manage to infiltrate there, and after stealing the data, they also discover that there is an important prisoner from the New Republic. The prisoner is Jacen Syndulla, of course, who is at that time a prestigious pilot. Yeah, I really like this. Ivan's comment goes on a little longer. You can go check it out in last week's community video. But I really like this idea because, again, it means that Jacen isn't part of the Resistance. He's not a Resistance pilot, and it sort of explains why Jacen wasn't part of the movies, why his name hasn't come up yet. Dawson Sims is up next, and he states, I'd love to see Jacen as Ben Solo's best friend at Luke's Jedi Academy. Yeah, Dawson, this is a really interesting idea, and that is, should we get to see Luke's Academy? How much are we going to get to see of Luke, if anything, of Kylo Ren? How much of the Force is going to be in Star Wars Resistance? These are big questions that I can't wait to find out the answers to. But remember, Star Wars Resistance is reportedly 6 months before The Force Awakens. So that means unless we get a flashback, we're not going to see Luke, Jacen, and Ben Solo at the Jedi Academy. Kylo's turn at the Jedi Academy would have happened far before Star Wars Resistance starts, or at least quite a bit before that. Thank you to everyone who contributed to this week's community video, and remember to use the Force within you to make the Star Wars community a better place by sharing your theories and speculation. You can do that by answering the question of the day, which today is, what questions do you want answered by Clone Wars Season 7? So that's, what questions do you want answered by Clone Wars Season 7? Any Clone Wars questions that you have, whether it's about Anakin or Ahsoka, let me know what those are. And as always, may the Force be with you.